So Val, thanks for coming on the Resilience Lab. And you've got a very interesting story that I want to unpack. You began a headquarters project just before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Probably the best time.
It was the best time. It's already funded.
There you go. It was already funded. So, but it had very different kind of dynamics and approaches, and you were trying to accomplish different things. So what I'd like to do is hear a little bit about what you did differently, maybe how the pandemic shifted some of your focus on that, and then we'll talk about the outcomes, because in terms of people being attracted back, you're getting some very good results. And I'd like everybody to be able to hear what this process is like.
Sure. We embarked on the project because we understood that we did not have a legible front door.
Pause. Legible front door.
Yeah.
What?
So we sat on Fountain Square, one of America's great outdoor living rooms, and it was hard to figure out how to get inside our building.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So no legible front door is
right.
Basically what that means. Okay. You could find us, but you couldn't get to us.
You had to know where it was.
Correct. Unless you wanted to get into the branch. But if you needed to visit somebody at HQ, it was not an easy thing to do.
Okay.
Not intuitive. We had 3 goals. The first was legibility.
Okay.
The second was unity. We had an opportunity to unify 2 buildings and thereby unify our downtown campus.
Okay.
And the third was connection to community, connection internally with one another. I jokingly mentioned the project was funded prior to COVID. I mean, we talk about, the construction team would talk about, well, project took 18 months. Well, the project took 3 years. Because as you know, with a project like that, the planning stage, the design stage is happening long before you swing hammers.
Right.
So there was a time in my tenure at the bank where almost all of it included this project. What COVID did for us, the crass way to put it is it got people out of the way. As hard as it was to have everybody.
Because they weren't physically in the building, so it gave you kind of free run of the place.
Right. So as hard as it was to have to send everybody home, that meant that when we had to route people through construction, there were very few people to route through. Wow. We still had to do it for safety reasons for the folks that did still have to come and go at the bank. But we took full advantage of that time to forge ahead like full steam through the construction process. What that meant was that when we did return to place, people came back to this entirely refreshed and reinvented experience.
Okay.
You could hear, I mean, when I'm asked about the metrics, like how do you, and I've told people, like, we hit a bullseye. Those 3 goals, that legibility, unity, connection, we hit the bullseye. Well, how do you know you hit the bullseye? And my answer is palpable joy.
Okay.
Like, well, that's a kind of a squishy metric.
Yeah, so what does that mean?
But what it means is when you stood on the second level overlooking this newly crafted atrium that unified these 2 buildings, you could hear people exclaiming with joy that, like, oh my goodness, I haven't seen you in so long, and look at this place. And that was, I mean, weeks and weeks. We heard those kinds of noises coming from the atrium. Now what that looks like is event activation where it's just humming. I mean, there's consistent human hum in the atrium activity. People are down there. They want to be down there in that space. And for us, I mean, we have the same realities as everybody else. Mondays are a little quieter. Fridays are super quiet. But midweek, the atrium is hopping almost all the time.
So other companies that have built out spaces and tried to improve amenities and make it attractive, they're not getting the kinds of results that you're getting. What did you do differently?
Well, first of all, I would say there's no one amenity that's going to bring people back if they don't want to be back.
Okay.
So with that said, we communicated a lot through the project, early and often, about what next steps were happening, what are the things you're going to see. If you do need to come downtown, here's how you get into the building. That was in the midst of the construction. We gave people previews. We had really good renderings that we started to tease people with. We really walked with the organization through the change purposefully, and it didn't stop there. That activation of that space has become a cultural lever. It reflects and supports the culture that we want to create.
Okay.
So I think those are the things that have made a difference for us. It's not about, I don't think return to place is about amenities. Those are nice and they're helpful to people. I think that return to place is about culture and leadership.
Okay. So what kind of leadership did you have? In a lot of organizations, leadership will sign off and get it started. And then the corporate real estate team and facilities will work with the architects and designers to create the solution. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, there's not much engagement. And what I heard earlier is that your leaders were involved throughout.
Mm-hmm. They were involved throughout. They communicated and with us when we did the soft opening, all the way up to the top of the house.
Okay.
They spoke at the soft opening. They encouraged people to be there, just to experience being together. And I think in the context of investing in your people, the way that leadership understands the value of a project like this is largely around attraction retention.
Okay.
And so people have options. Why would I work in a place that hasn't been touched in 40 years? I don't need to. And the indication of that level of investment in employees, not very high. So I think, leaders understood, and we had already started to renovate our headquarters. We'd been in the process of that for several years, floor to floor in our tower building, which is 31 floors. And so now doing the atrium space and connecting the buildings was a continuation of a journey we'd been on that people had started to experience and started to see the value of. I think
so
that
the story was
key
already in place, and so they already had a little bit of anticipation of what was coming.
Yes, this was catapulting. I don't think anybody would have imagined from any given tower floor what the atrium experience would be. We also, the other thing I would share too, Rex, is that we also did a second floor space that we call the Forum. Oh. Part of the Forum looks out onto the atrium, is open to the atrium. We call it the Forum because in every civilization throughout history, there has been a place to share ideas, to learn, to be a part of the broader community, whether that's the ancient dynasties of Africa or the Roman Empire. So in Rome, it was called a forum. The Forum could be called a conference center for us, but it's much more than that. It's like everything I just described. And through the pandemic, it became a way for us to stay on mission. So the Forum actually opened before the atrium and gave us places that teams could come to gather and solve problems for our customers while they were still socially distanced. So we had large enough spaces in the Forum with the ability to do displayed thinking and ideate and solve. And so our mission to keep the customer at the center of everything that we do was fulfilled in the Forum prior to the atrium even opening. And now they're used in conjunction with each other all the time.
It's interesting. There was a specific space or place to have this coordination, this visioning, and it was central for you guys.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just, a lot of conference centers are kind of ancillary spaces, but this seemed like a very strategic space for you.
Destination space is little used. Because you have to be much more planful. If we're working together and I can just say, hey, Rex, come over here and look at this with me. Right. And then let's step into this office, this huddle room that's 5 feet away or 10 feet away. And we don't have to walk anywhere and we don't have to book anything. And now the Forum, you need to book. But I think it being central is absolutely key.
So it's a path of
Yes.
least resistance.
Yes.
Picking your partners, that's a challenging process. And you had a unique relationship with BHDP.
Yes.
Talk about how the two of you came together and the process that you had, because that was definitely a part of the success.
Certainly. We started Project Connect, which is the name of this project. I came to the bank in June of 2017, and I was asked to go explore the feasibility of this project in October.
Okay.
At that time, we had started an RFP for architectural services, not for this project, but we knew we had transformation across the footprint and we needed an architectural partner. I met with Patrick Donnelly, who was then at BHDP, and there was just a real philosophical alignment.
Interesting.
I have a very philosophical approach to design. I have a very well-developed point of view about design. Early in my career, I had a leader who exposed me to Kevin Lynch's image of a city.
Sure.
As strange as this sounds for somebody early in their career, it was like I came home. It just made so much sense to me. Everything about Lynch's work is so humane and has informed my approach to design my entire career from that point forward. And so Patrick and I had this conversation where it just felt like kindred spirits, and we had projects already going and said, the RFP is not done, but would you engage with us on some project work? And so we had already started that process with them. And when we had the idea to create this legible corporate entry that actually would welcome people into our personal space, that would become our front door, they were the natural go-to. And so we said, okay, let's ideate on this. And we came up with 6 options initially. One of the particular aspects of this project is that we own out into Fountain Square what's perceived as public space is actually our property. And so we had various ways that we could capture some of that space without taking from the public experience. That was a part of those 6 iterations that we did. And we selected one and started to develop it from there. We engaged, the other part of the process that I think was really critical is we engaged a cross-section of people from throughout the bank, from human capital to people on the culture team, to people on the innovation team, to folks on the retail team and property management, and just a really broad cross-section of folks, marketing, and said, let's pretend this project is done. What does it feel like to you? It's successful. It's wonderful. You like to be here. Why? Tell us why. Tell us what it feels like. And that really informed and became the lens for the decisions that we made. This decision or that decision, is it going to contribute to that feeling that team articulated to us or not?
And from what I understand, it wasn't just different departments, but it was different levels in the company as well.
Yep.
And so what was that part like too? And how did they feel, people who are, entry level or, mid-level, what did that feel like to them? Because that they're not used to that.
Mm-hmm. It makes people feel valued when they're asked, when they're engaged. And the reality is a lot of people that we might not have as top of mind because in a hierarchy, they're at a particular level that we may or may not interact with on a regular basis, have an expertise that is valuable that we need. They have a perspective that we need at the table. So those conversations were very important.
Yeah. I worked with one company that did a culture audit, and they did something similar, but these were like secret Santas, so to speak. They kept a list of behaviors of what made them proud and what really irritated them, and kept a little journal. But one of the most important voices in that was the receptionist. She saw behavior, the unguarded behavior, the good and the bad. And one of the things that they found is that the managers would typically come in on their cell phone, go straight to their offices, shut the door. So that was a major design change and thing. And I don't think people leverage or recognize everybody sees the organization through a different lens,
That's right.
and that comes together. So that's cool that you did that.
That's right.
Now, moving forward into this new, 3.5 day a week or whatever it is routine, there's the younger employees who came on board during may feel like I don't need to come in. You had some really great insight and advice on how to coach, how managers can coach their people as to the value of coming in. And so replay that for me.
Sure. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the approach that leaders have taken. For us, initially it was, work with your manager. We know everybody needs flexibility, and so we're not going to create a policy. We still don't have a real formal policy. It's kind of, the message is we're an on-site culture. We know you need flexibility here and there for doing life. And so here's what we think flexibility looks like. But by and large, people are still working with their leaders individually.
Okay.
My approach to that with my team has been principle-based.
Okay.
And it's based on three things. The first is communication. And I ask that they communicate up and out and often. So communicate to me, communicate with your peers, communicate regularly. If you proactively let people know what you have going on, what you've accomplished, what you need, nobody's wondering what you're doing. So it takes a lot of mystery out of it if you're not together. The second is be thoughtful of your peers. So we have a team calendar. I ask the team to update it 1 to 2 weeks out. More if they have it, but at least 1 to 2 weeks out. And if you have an option next week of the days you can be here, then choose the days other people are already saying they're going to be here, because then you have human hum and it's more energizing and you can collaborate when you're here. Nobody needs to come in here and sit by themselves. You can do that at home. And the third thing is really around owning your own career. So the thing that I share with my team is we do have leaders here that like to see people. I can't position you in the organization if you're never here. And so you really have to own your own career. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that of making decisions about, if my leader and my leader's leader are going to be on site and I'm in a meeting with them, maybe that's a good day for me to be here, even if it's the only meeting I show up for, because it's a way for me to position myself. There's just some wisdom that you need to apply with that.
Yeah. How did you come up with those 3 principles? Because I talk to a lot of managers who just feel like if they set expectations on their employees, and that's going to be, they're going to leave or resist, or worse, report them for not being supportive of whatever their needs are.
It's a good question. I noticed in the midst of return to place, I was particularly seeing this on LinkedIn in the articles that people were posting. The tenor that the media had I'll say cranked up around this issue of returning to place had not helped us. And it really created or facilitated or grew this lack of trust. And it became so prevalent that what I started to see is discretionary effort being held hostage.
Explain.
So you had employers being painted as though they didn't trust anybody. And you had quiet quitting on the other side of that, which in my mind is simply bad behavior. If you don't like what's happening at the place you work, talk to your leaders or brush up your resume and get it on the street. Don't go to work and sabotage the organization. It's just bad behavior. So you had this okay, we're going to take our corners. And now we're in opposition to each other.
Right.
Some of that, I think, probably was legitimate. There probably were organizations not handling it well. There was quiet quitting. It was happening. A lot of it, I think, was exacerbated by the way it was being presented in media. And I didn't like the tenor. I didn't like the lack of trust that started to, and the entitlement that started to grow around it. And I started to think about, well, what really is the problem? And if I want flexibility, so here was the other thing is that is the terms hybrid and flexible being used synonymously, and they're not.
Okay.
Really bothered me. I started to feel like if I never hear the word hybrid again, I would be happy. They're not the same. And so I started to just think through, like, okay, personally, if I want flexibility, what are the things that are going to make that conversation go well with my leader? And it was, well, he's going to want me to communicate what I'm up to regularly. He's not going to want there to be mystery. He's going to want me to be thoughtful of other people. And for me, as a leader in my organization, that means thinking about the culture that I'm setting. What am I setting my own thermostat at so that I can be a thermostat for others? So it was the things that those three principles are really a capture of my own processing of how do I make sure that I can achieve my flexibility that I need,
Right.
but also just kind of a revolt against that climate is unhelpful. It's not going to get us the flexibility we need. And as organizations, we won't retain high performers.
So what's next now that you've gotten the headquarters? What's next for you and your team?
Mm-hmm.
Getting through the rest of 2023 and into 2024.
Mm-hmm. We continue to work through the footprint.
Okay.
We're not done, so there's
Okay.
work.
So there's
work,
more to do.
Yes, there's work yet to be done. One of the things that we have as an initiative right now is around one of our primary operations centers, because the work looks different there than in a lot of the spaces we've touched so far. The density is higher. The work that folks do in those operations centers is more tethered to their space, their individual spaces. And so how do we make sure that we're creating an experience for the folks that are in our operations centers that is every bit as positive and gives them all of the variety, choice, and flexibility that everybody else gets throughout the footprint? So that's a primary initiative for us right now, and that'll take us through the next few years. An operations center for us is a huge, huge building. And so that's an important one. I've been wanting to get my hands on that experience since I came to the bank, and I'm excited about what we can create for them.
The topic that I'd like to finish on is a little bit about well-being and what you saw in your team through the pandemic, how you took care of them, but also what was your journey going through the pandemic? Where did you find your strength in the resilience?
I think when we think about well-being, people often think about health as physical health. You can't deny mental health as a conversation now. When I think about well-being in the workplace, I think about it's things like, hey, I need to go pick up my kiddo and it's 3 p.m. And if that's a non-issue, that's a fantastic contributor to my well-being.
Wow.
I'm not going to get penalized for walking out the door early because my leader trusts that I'm going to get the job done. And also he knows that my child is more important than the job. Everybody on my team at the time of the pandemic was actively raising children. They need that I just described, that contributor to their well-being. I did little things like team coffee once a week, where we just got on a Zoom call and we didn't talk about work. We get your cup of whatever, and let's just check in and how's everybody doing. Yeah. In my one-on-ones, it was regular. How are you doing personally? Is there anything that you need? Is there any support that you need? Do you need to take a break? Go take a break. So it was little things like that. And I've really just tried to create a culture where if I sense that somebody needs something, I give it to them. And most of the time, that's the latitude to come and go as they need to.
Right.
I have one gentleman on my team who travels a lot. He has, of everybody on my team, has the heaviest travel schedule because of his role. And there are times where I don't see him for 2 weeks in a row. And part of the reason is because I encourage him to stay remote at home on the days that he's not traveling. Because when he's not traveling, he's away from his family.
Right.
And I've had many, many calls with him with kids climbing on his lap, and it's
Nice.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I know he's there and they're important to him and he's important to them and he's been on the road for 2 or 3 or 4 days. So I want that for them. The other thing I would say is I really encourage my team to take agency over their calendars.
That's a big deal.
It's hard. It's a big deal,
right.
And it's a tough one,
Right.
because you have to say no to people. And for some of us, that's a hard thing to do.
Right.
We don't want to say no to people. But it's things like, hey, guys, if a meeting includes more than 10 people, it's not a meeting, it's a presentation. So the first thing you do is look at that list and you say, do I have time for a presentation today?
Nice. I like that.
And if you don't have time for a presentation, then you call that person and you say, you know what, I need to decline this. I've got some competing priorities on my calendar. Is there anything in particular you need from me? And can I catch up with you in 5 minutes afterward? Or it may be that you just decide that there are some things that you don't need to be a part of every single week. The easy button has become, well, let's just put on a weekly meeting for that thing.
Right.
That's not the easy button when it's tapping you out and you already have 3 other things weekly in that slot. So I've really encouraged them to take agency. The hard thing about that is they have to do it. I will give them all the air cover they need, but they still have to do it. And if they won't, they are destined for burnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've seen it.
So let's wrap up with where you think, for you, management is the hard part. It's either the linchpin or the Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were going to give yourself some advice as to what you need for the next 6 months, or another manager to get through this, because the advice you've given, extremely practical, everyone's going to take notes, but oftentimes we need to tell ourselves, what do we need to do? So what are you going to tell yourself over the next 6 months? What are you going to do differently?
Continue to take agency.
Okay.
One decision at a time. One foot in front of the other.
Okay.
Every decision is temporary until it's permanent.
I like
Right?
that.
So you make a decision and you say,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm going to test this for 3 months. In 3 months, I'm going to reassess.
Got it.
I either want to keep doing it or
Yeah.
I want to make a change. Whatever that thing is. Could be as big as getting a new job, could be as small as I'm not going to do that meeting anymore. And let's see how it pans out.
Wow.
So those are the things that are in my head right now, and rest when I need to rest. I'm 25 years into my career. I'm a perpetually recovering workaholic, and I wish it had not taken me this long to take care of myself.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's a tough thing to learn, because you don't realize how far down the road you've gone until you look back and go, wow, that's a lot of time that I've done this behavior or that behavior. Right. For those of us who love what we do, it's often sleep deprivation and things like that. And for high performers, it's taking on and taking on and taking on. And so that's the other thing, is just listening to my own body, to my own spirit. If I'm reacting to something at work, why am I reacting like this? And take a breath. And take the license to pause. I had this recently. I had a conversation with my leader, and he shared some news with me, and he said, "What are you thinking?" And I said, "Respectfully, this is not a good time for me to tell you what I'm thinking. I need to come back to you." because it really would not have been a good time for me to tell what I was thinking.
That's good.
And we have a really
that.
good relationship. I could have unloaded everything, and he
Sure.
would have handled it
Yeah.
just fine.
I love that
But-
pause thing,
yeah.
though. We all need the pause button.
Yes. Pause before you, especially if you have the gift of a sharp tongue like I do. Pause is a wise thing.
You're very clear. So, you're very clear, very precise. So I appreciate that. Val, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For being on the Resilience Lab. And, people are going to take notes, because I've got mental notes, but the good thing is I've got the recording. So thank you very much.
Well, it has truly been an honor, Rex.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.